Good morning, everybody, unless of course you're watching this video in the evening. In that case, good evening, and you're watching Time Travel TV, and it's Christmas time! That's why I thought today we'll do a happy video on my top 10 most historically inaccurate films, which they make me really cross, historically inaccurate films. I hope they make you cross too. Just for heads up, we're not doing films that purposely change the past, and also we're not doing films which are supposed to be silly. For instance, that's why Life of Brian isn't on this list. So, shall we take it away with number 10? So, at number 10 we have The Imitation Game. Now, the problems with this film are that the naming of the code-breaking machine was not Christopher. Not only that, but it makes it seem as though Alan Turing was the only person building the machine. It's actually a joint effort. Also, it says there was a lot of rivalry between the code breakers, which didn't happen, and they also completely ignore the fact that code breaking was not the only thing that went on at Bletchley Park. Not only that, but they completely failed to speak about the Polish input. Now, the Polish were very important at Bletchley Park and the whole breaking of the Enigma code. So that's why The Imitation Game makes my list. Let's look at number 9, shall we? So, at number 9 we have The Last Samurai. Now, it really makes it seem as though the new Japanese army was more like Dad's army in the film, and although they were fairly inexperienced, they weren't as rubbish as what they mention in the film. Not only that, but for some reason, they seem to let Tom Cruise in to become a samurai almost instantly, whereas in real life they wouldn't be very dubious about outsiders. Not only that, but somehow Tom Cruise manages to learn the art of the samurai in a matter of weeks, where it should have really taken years to learn. So that's why The Last Samurai definitely makes my list. Let's go to number 8. So at number 8 we have 300, saying the story of the Battle of Thermopylae. Now, it really makes it seem in this film that Spartans went into battle almost naked. Well, that's not true. Second of all, it speaks of sieging war elephants from Persia, which is also not true. And also, yes, there were 300 Spartans there, but there were also like a couple of thousand other Greeks there. So there were 300 Spartans, but it ignores the fact that it was a much bigger army than that. And that's what really gets up my nose with this film. Also, I think there's far too much CGI, and I think it really has dated, in my opinion. It looks really old. So, that's why 300's on my list. Let's go to the next one, shall we? So, at number 7, we have The Battle of the Bulge. This is the oldest film on the list, from 1965, and it was criticised by none other than Dwight D. Eisenhower, the famous American president and general. So he's quite a big cheese, you know. I don't understand how they thought they could have used Patton tanks, put them in German markings and called them Tiger tanks. Same with the Sherman tanks. What the hell were they thinking by using I think it was Stuart tanks they used as the Sherman tanks. But the scale is completely wrong. It's obviously false, and I don't see what they were thinking. So let's move on as quickly as possible from this film. Now, next we've got Pearl Harbor at number 6. And there's quite a few things wrong with this, and I'm really not going to have time to talk about them all, so I'm going to talk about one, and this is unforgivable. The scene where they have the guy and they've got his girlfriend in with him in the cockpit of the same airplane, the Curtiss Warhawk. What were they thinking? You cannot fit 2 people in there, you can barely fit 1 person in there. Also, it makes it seem as though the Americans were basically having a massive lie-in on the day that the Japanese attacked. Also has a very inaccurate representation of the Japanese pilots, and I don't like this film much. If you want to watch a film about Pearl Harbor, watch the film Tora 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 instead. So let's move on to the next one, shall we? So at number 5, we've got 1492 Conquest of Paradise. Now, this is not a very well known film because it's a box office flop. If you haven't seen it, don't bother. I mean, when a film like Carry On Columbus is actually better, you know it's a really, really bad film. So, it has a really inaccurate representation of Christopher Columbus. It says what an amazing guy he is. If you've researched him a little bit, you'll find out he wasn't the nicest man in the world. He was a bit nasty sometimes. Not only that, it really stresses the fact that they thought the world was flat before Christopher Columbus came along. Let me get this straight. Everybody already knew the world was blimmin' round before Columbus came along. Even the Greeks knew that the world was blimmin' round. So that's why it appears on my list. Don't watch it if you haven't already. So this is our first Mel Gibson film at number 4. And The Patriot is not a very good film, in my opinion. It really presents the British as, like, evil Nazis. The burning down of the church scene, for instance, unforgivable. There's a point in the film where the British say they're going to free the slaves if they fight for their army, and they say this is a terrible thing to do. And then the Americans do the exact same thing and say this is an amazing thing to do. So I really don't like this film very much. It's contradictory, and it's just a bog standard Mel Gibson film, in my opinion. So I don't like The Patriot, and don't watch it if you haven't already. So I really surprised myself by not putting Braveheart at number 1, but there are 2 even worse films than this, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But they couldn't even get the date right with Braveheart. They couldn't get everything happens out of sync, everything also happens wrong, and also the costumes were even wrong. It looks like the Scottish seem to be wearing nothing. I mean, they borrowed the costumes from 300, perhaps. I mean, in my opinion, the film just looks like such amount of anti-English propaganda. I mean, who was the script advisor? Nicola Sturgeon? I don't know. I mean, literally, it's just a prequel to Patriot. That's all I can say about it, really. So in second place, Apocalypto is our third Mel Gibson film, and our second place most historically inaccurate film. Mel Gibson wasn't acting in it this time, he was directing it, but it's set in the Mayan times, and it was rightly so praised for being all in Mayan, all the speech was in Mayan, it's a foreign language film. But one thing is set in the Mayan times, but the Mayans are portrayed as Aztecs. The costumes are all wrong, the mass human sacrifice is wrong. What are they doing bringing the conquistadors in at the end? That happened like 600 years in the future. This is a stupid film. Don't watch it if you haven't already. I've said that so many times. Let's look at number 1, an actually quite offensive film in my opinion. Now you must never watch this film, U571, if you haven't already, because not only is it bad, it's historically inaccurate, and in my opinion, it's so inaccurate it's offensive. I detest this film. What basically happens in the film is that, you know how the first Enigma machine was captured by members of the crew of the HMS Bulldog 7 months before the Americans joined the war? The Americans rewrite it slightly, so American submarine captures the first one after they've joined the war. So the only thing in the film that actually happens is that World War II happened. And they even portray the U-boat crews as like evil little Nazi Gestapo members, when most of them were just German sailors. People say that the film Gone with the Wind's offensive, but personally I don't find as much wrong with that as I do with this, for that film has very accurate costumes and props. Another misjudged film, in my opinion, is Zulu, a film which has sticks to the plot very consistently throughout the film. Not only that, I would argue is actually anti-racist and anti-imperialist, that film. If you want to watch a film that has German U-boat crews in it, watch the film Das Boot, if you don't mind subtitles. I do mind subtitles because I'm dyslexic and therefore cannot read them fast enough. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe to the Time Travel TV and have a very Merry Christmas. And if you get any of these films for Christmas, just nod politely and say thank you and then never watch them.